Okay, so now that we have our system set up and everything configured so that we're having communication between the console and Universal Control and UC Metro, we've got our broadcast engineer, our buddy Joe Henson, in our broadcast room, and we're going to create two different versions of how he can build a mix. We're going to start with the simpler version, which is basically to create just a post-fade aux send of every channel, and that enables him to have level control of all of our inputs. This is a great solution for a new volunteer who doesn't really understand all the nuances of EQ and compression yet. Maybe they're just getting started and you want them to just manage levels. This is a great way for them to have control of faders for the broadcast mix, but not have to worry about shaping the tonality because they're getting a post-fader send of your mix. So what we're going to do is we have aux 15 and 16 that's going to be Joe's mix. So I'm going to take all of my inputs and just put them at unity on my send so that he's getting basically a zeroed out send of all of my input faders. And that's the first 24, and then here's 25 through 32. Now I noticed that 29, 30, 31, and 32 are my room mics. I'm not using them in my main mix because I don't need audience mics. I've got the audience itself. But I noticed that these channels are actually assigned to the left-right. So I need to deselect that so that since those faders are up, I don't get them in my mix. I need to just only be sending that to him. So I think we're all set now with our masters. Need to make sure that my master send fader is up. So that's everything is at 0. Now I'll go back to the main mix, and what I'll do is I'll play a section of the song and you'll hear the front of house mix that I'm doing, and then we'll switch back and forth to Joe's mix so you can hear how he's making some level changes based on what the broadcast needs to hear. Joe, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, buddy.
And what I may do, since he doesn't have tonality control, I may stop halfway through and just check in to make sure that I don't need to change anything too drastically for what he needs to hear. You know, sometimes you do need to make compromises for what the house needs and what the broadcast needs if you're doing it this way. So it's important to have good communication between those two engineers so that you can come up with areas. You know, there may be times you need to compromise, and so you just come up with a way to make that happen. So let's start rolling, and we'll see what happens. Okay, Joe, how are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good. How's that acoustic guitar treating you over there? It seems a little bright on my end.
Okay, yeah, I'm really not featuring it. I think, you know, for me, when I was listening to it during rehearsal, it felt a little jangly and a little, well, I'm not sure. Why don't we listen to just that and come up with maybe a better EQ?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let me mute everything else and see what we see. Yeah, so he's really, I mean, at that point, I don't know, it's more of a percussion instrument really than a melodic instrument. I think there's enough things going on in the rest of the band that we don't really need him to be poking out in the mix at all. So I did take some of that upper mid EQ and a high shelf and kind of bring that down a little bit. What else are you hearing?
Vocals aren't cutting through too well for me. That being
Okay.
said, I did go to my master bus on my broadcast output and tried to boost a little bit of top end to try to get a little bit more presence out of the whole entire mix.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I am, and this is where those compromises are going to come into play, right?
For sure.
I am having to take a little bit of that upper mid range out of some of those female vocals just because in the room it's a little strident if you don't do that. But, right now, like I've got right around a little less than 3K, I've got about a 4 dB cut.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can bring that up a little bit and not cut so much and see if we can get a little more presence for sure out of the lead vocal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That might make a good compromise. So here's about half as much of that cut. And let me unmute everything so that we can get it kind of all back in context and see if our acoustic is better and if that vocal translates a little better. How's that treating you?
Yeah, that immediately felt better.
I think that's a good example of where that kind of feedback between two people can come into play because I actually like that better in my front of house mix too. That little tweak to that vocal really helps kind of add some presence and helps give some more clarity to what she's doing. The other thing about the acoustic, and this is just a general mix thing, I know that she's not leading with an acoustic guitar, right? The acoustic guitar is somewhere else on stage. So I know that it doesn't even visually come across as a prominent leading instrument. So I'm okay with backing off the level, warming up the tone, not trying to get as much out of that acoustic as I would maybe if it was a better sounding guitar with somebody who was maybe finger picking or doing something that was more intentionally meant to be heard. So those kind of compromises, I don't mind making at all. So that's great. I think this gives us a really good example of how a broadcast engineer can take just the ability to manipulate faders and a little bit of bus EQ and make an experience for our online audience that is actually more compelling than just what we could do from front of house alone. So thanks, Joe. I'm glad we get to work together on this. Now we're going to move on to another layer of flexibility altogether. We're going to give Joe complete independent control of all the inputs so that we can let him control EQ and compression and level and effects in a completely separate mix for broadcast. Joe, how does that sound?
Sounds great. Good idea.
All right, let's do it.